The tale starts evolved with James, a 17-year vintage boy who believes he's a psychopath due to the fact he feels no feelings. He says he in no way loved jokes or laughter while a baby. He turned into regularly aggravated through his father Phil's dad jokes and regularly imagined punching him in the face. While James turned into 9, he intentionally positioned his hand in a deep fryer hoping to revel in something new. Through the age of 15 he took his disturbing interest in addition through taking his neighbor's cat into the woods and killing it steadily. He started killing greater animals in and try and feel something, however it turned into all in useless. Now at 17 James desires to pass past animals and goal a human, believing that would possibly wake up a few feelings inside him. Lamentably at college he encounters Alyssa, a woman who appears simply as twisted as him, and he tactics him to begin a communique. Alyssa stocks her tale explaining that she has continually desired to stay away far from the arena, a desire formed through her own circle of relatives' problems. Her mother has remarried and her stepfather's conduct makes her deeply uncomfortable. She is regularly caught looking after her younger one half of siblings, which best adds to her frustration regardless of now no longer seeing her actual father due to the fact that she turned into 8. She treasures him for continually remembering her birthday and sending her playing cards. At college Alyssa struggles to hook up with others and dislikes individuals who appear to get at the side of everybody. All through lunch a woman sitting throughout from her texts her as opposed to speaking. Immediately aggravated Alyssa confronts her. However, the woman's informal reaction irritates her even greater. In a suit of anger she smashes her Telcel smartphone and storms off. As she walks away she notices James sitting on my own and decides to method him, sensing he would possibly be a person who is aware. She begins evolve to communicate through criticizing his skating competencies, which catches James' attention. Internally James thinks Alyssa should be the appropriate goal after college. Alyssa reveals James sitting on my own and assumes he has been anticipating her. He performs along pretending to be interested by her, and she all of a sudden kisses him whilst walking. Collectively Alyssa mentions breaking her Telcel smartphone and factors out that they can't textual content every different. James, absolutely unfazed, says he would not have a Telcel smartphone both, and in a flat tone asks if she might move on a date with him. Alyssa is of the same opinion. They visit a neighborhood eating place. While the waitress comes to take their order Alyssa rudely needs a spoon. The waitress angry tells her that such language is not allowed. Alyssa apologizes, however then paradoxically says she wishes a big banana. This enrages the waitress, who calls protection, prompting Alyssa to hurricane out swearing. James realizes Alyssa has her personal intellectual troubles. Later Alyssa asks if she will come to James' residence. He is amazed, however sees this as a perfect possibility to execute his plan. While they come Alyssa reveals the residence unusual, commenting at the huge number of home windows. She notices a photograph and asks approximately it. James explains that it's his mom who's presently in Japan. Alyssa then touches James inappropriately, which makes him realize that she is continuously preoccupied with mind of doing it. In the meantime Alyssa is going to the kitchen and makes herself a piece of toast absolutely burnt, while James stands in the back of her deep in concept approximately how he may kill her. At that second Phil arrives domestic and is amazed to peer Alyssa with James. He jokingly feedback that he concept James is probably homosexual, however is relieved to peer he is immediately Alyssa, but retorts that she would not suppose James is immediately either. She believes he is probably asexual. Later at the rooftop of the residence Alyssa bluntly asks James if he has ever slept with a female earlier. Then internally James makes a decision that self-assurance is essential in this case, so he lies and says he has slept with many women. Alyssa then casually tells him that she can be able to come back tomorrow at 11:00 waiting for him to sleep together along with her tomorrow at 11:00 a.m. James waits at domestic absolutely prepared. He hides a knife, making plans to kill Alyssa as quickly as she arrives, but even as the clock passes 11 Alyssa would not show up. In the meantime Alyssa is set to go away her residence while her mom Gwen stops her, inquiring for assist with own circle of relatives feature. Alyssa attempts to provide an explanation for that she needs to head someplace crucial, however after Gwen insists she reluctantly consents. During the feature Alyssa serves goodies to the visitors, leaving her exhausted midway through the occasion. Tony, her stepfather, gives her a drink. Alyssa coldly tells him now no longer to anticipate something from her. However, Tony inappropriately touches her. Gwen notices this, however says not anything. Alyssa realizes something is severely wrong. Tony is crossing obstacles and her mom's silence is simply as disturbing. Livid and disenchanted, Alyssa makes a decision to go away. Her domestic for top she places on her actual father Leslie's jacket and runs away, heading immediately to James' residence. At James' vicinity, Alyssa storms in and, still fuming, takes to the air her blouse and sits on the sofa. James, watching her quietly, attempts to retrieve the knife he had hidden. Alyssa all at once asks if he wants to go away the city and pass someplace far away together along with her. James, understanding he needs to be affected person if he desires to kill her, consents to her plan and says he is ready to move. Alyssa tells him to get his father's vehicle and James discreetly slips the knife into his pocket. Collectively they head out of doors. As James takes the auto, Phil arrives domestic and is startled to look them. Without hesitation, James punches Phil in the face, knocking him down, and steals the auto. As they force away, Alyssa asks James if he's scared. He responds with mild hesitation, admitting that he is probably only a little. Alyssa, at the different hand, optimistically states that she isn't always scared in any respect. This makes James replicate, questioning that she honestly should be scared. Then they each head to a gaming area. Alyssa plays enthusiastically, completely immersed within inside the video games. However, James stays impassive as typical, displaying no response. At one point, Alyssa indicates to James that he should place his tongue in her ear. James, without a good deal concept, does as she asks. This leads to the area supervisor noticing them and, disturbed with the aid of using their conduct, kicks them out. Then they each visit a fancy eating place to devour. After completing their meal, Alyssa asks James if he introduced cash with him. James admits that he forgot to carry any. Alyssa tells him that the cash she had introduced with her becomes spent on the gaming area. The two of them quietly go away the eating place without paying, and thankfully the eating place group of workers would not. Word later, as they preserve their adventure, Alyssa begins Evolved to get mischievous and starts Evolved to undress James. This distraction causes the auto to lose, manipulate and crash into a tree. As they each go out the auto, it catches on Hearth Place. James is slightly involved due to the fact the auto become his father's lifelong funding. They start walking with James shirtless, attempting to hitch a experience, but no automobiles forestall for them. Subsequently, a van pulls over the motive force. An older guy gives them a experience, pronouncing he is heading south and that they can be a part of him in the event that they need. James is ready. However, Alyssa will become suspicious of the person. The person tells Alyssa that there is a sweater at the returned seat, asking her to fetch it for James. He then jokes, asking what they had been doing with inside the woods. James responds, pronouncing there has been nothing beside the point among them. The person laughs and reassures them that he would not care what they do, claiming he is now no longer a cop. He mentions that he spent 5 years with inside the Navy and is heading south to shop for a conflict canine. He gives to call James' mom and inform her their place. However, James replies that his mom is lifeless. Alyssa is taken aback upon listening to this. They forestall her to eating place and Alyssa asks James why he lied about his mom being in Germany. James says it is an extended tale. Alyssa then says she would not agree with the person simply. Then the person returns with espresso and indicates them pics of his spouse and kids. Alyssa mocks the advent of the person's kids, calling them potato faces and making amusing in their appears. That's quite impolite. James attempts to prevent her. However, Alyssa, irritated, storms out of the eating place. James apologizes to the person and tells him that he desires to apply the washroom. The person has the same opinion, announcing he additionally desires to head out of doors. Alyssa realizes she would possibly have stated an excessive amount of and makes a decision to head lower back to express regret, but whilst she returns she reveals that each James and the person have disappeared with inside the lavatory. The person starts Evolved, inappropriately touching James even as he's urinating. James does not face up to. Unexpectedly, Alyssa enters and is taken aback. She asks James if he is homosexual. James replies that he is under no circumstances homosexual and that the person compelled himself on him. The guy attempts to depart, however Alyssa stops him and needs his pockets, threatening to record him to the police and his family for inappropriately touching kids. The person surrenders and arms over his pockets, which includes a huge sum of coins. Then they each visit a close-by hotel to spend spend the night time. Alyssa is going to the lavatory and James begins evolved making ready to kill her, taking a knife out of his boot. Simply then Alyssa's crying may be heard from the restroom. James suppresses their notion of killing her. After Alyssa comes out, she calls domestic from the hotel telephone smartphone. However, her stepfather Tony selections up. Alyssa asks to talk to her mom, however Tony dismisses her request, announcing her mom does not care. Approximately her Gwen as standard remains silent and does not respond. Alyssa returns to the room and asks James to hug her tightly. James complies. On this second it appears that evidently James would possibly be beginning to sense a few emotions. In the meantime, James' father Phil calls the police to provoke in research. The following day they go away the hotel without an automobile. They may be compelled to walk. Alyssa tells James she desires to visit her actual father Leslie. James has the same opinion, however because the residence is away as they will want to trap a teacher. Alyssa indicates that they relaxation for an afternoon or earlier than taking the teach, whilst James asks wherein they should prevent. Alyssa's simplest solution is to keep on foot alongside the manor. Alyssa notices a huge deserted residence. The nation of the residence makes it clean that no person has lived there for a long term. She breaks the glass on the front gate and sneaks internal. James expresses situation worried it'd motive hassle later, however Alyssa dismisses it, telling him now no longer to worry. Internal they stumble upon a photo of the residence's proprietor and Alyssa sticks her chewing gum on it. The two take a seat down with the aid of using the pool and devour with the intention to lighten the temper. Alyssa performs a few songs and begins evolved dancing. First of all James hesitates, however after a few coaxing from Alyssa he joins in. While Alyssa attempts to get intimate with him, James factors to the image of the residence proprietor announcing that he's looking them and that they should not do this. Alyssa annoyed calls him dull and walks out. Outdoor she meets a black guy who introduces himself as Toir. Alyssa feedback on how strange his call is. He explains that his actual call is Christopher, however he prefers to be called Topher due to the fact he considers himself bizarre. Alyssa reveals this attractive and rapidly kisses him, then invitations him to sign up for her. In the meantime James studies feelings he has by no means felt earlier than a deep feel of soreness developing in him. He waits for Alyssa keeping plants, however she quickly returns with some other guy. Alyssa tells James that she's going upstairs to do with Toir for the primary time in his existence. James feels his heart break. He studies a surge of feelings that he has been looking ahead to all his existence. In spite of the ache he reveals a twisted feel of gratitude closer to Alyssa, believing that it become due to her that those feelings ultimately awoke in him. Downstairs James begins evolved rummaging through one-of-a-kind drawers, checking matters around the residence. All at once he comes throughout a digital digicam and a few pics all belonging to the proprietor of the residence. What he sees shocks him. Pics of the guy committing brutal acts of rape and homicide towards numerous girls. In the meantime upstairs Alyssa is set to get intimate with Toir. While she all at once thinks of James she stops and tells Toir to go away. Livid Toir calls her and storms out. After Topher leaves, James is going upstairs to peer Alyssa, however she refuses to permit him in. James waits outdoor making plans to kill her even as she sleeps, but while she ultimately falls asleep and James sneaks in to hold out his plan, seeing her peacefully asleep softens his coronary heart. He hesitates and comes to a decision now no longer to undergo with it. Alternatively he lies beside her gently touching her hand. It appears as though James is beginning to broaden actual emotions for her. At that second the residence's proprietor Professor Clive ultimately returns domestic. Seeing the country of his residence he right now realizes that a person has damaged in. He grabs a sharp iron rod and quietly heads upstairs. James hears him coming and quick hides below the mattress while Clive activates the mild. He sees a younger woman sound asleep on his mattress. His lust overcomes him and he locks the door earlier than starting to harass Alyssa, even trying to pressure her. Looking this spread, James can no longer live hidden. He springs from below the mattress and stabs Clive with inside the neck with the knife, killing him immediately. Alyssa too is soaking wet in his blood. Alyssa tells James that they are in severe hassle now, blaming themselves for breaking into Clive's residence. James defends his actions, announcing that Clive became going to damage her, so he had no desire however to kill him. Alyssa nonetheless worrying responds that the police might not agree with that. She says they want to eliminate the frame. They both attempt to elevate Clive's frame, however fail. James mentions he had examined that a frame becomes heavier after loss of life. Alyssa indicates their consciousness on cleansing up their tracks. Collectively they undergo the residence, wiping away their fingerprints and any proof that would hyperlink them to the crime. James, sitting via way of means of Clive's frame, displays on how he would not experience the manner he notion he might after killing a person. Alyssa, nonetheless shaken, asks why he even needed to kill Clive. James insists that Clive became a serial killer and that he stored her lifestyles. He then suggests Alyssa the snapshots and motion pictures of Clive's crimes as evidence. Alyssa tells him to depart those with the frame and indicates they get out of there. Alyssa adjustments her garments, burns the vintage ones, and tells James they want to visit her father Leslie right away. James factors out that her jacket has bloodstains on it, suggesting she burned it as nicely. Alyssa refuses, announcing it is her father's jacket and she'll by no means ruin it. They eventually make their manner to the railway station. Alyssa is fearful, fearing they will be stuck, so she makes a decision they ought to change their look. She dyes her hair blonde and offers James a brand new haircut. They purchase new garments and watch for the teach. Whilst ready, Alyssa asks James wherein he were given the knife. He ignores her query. In the meantime, Clive's mother returns. Domestic screams upon locating his frame and calls the police. Two investigators, Eunice and Terry, arrive on the scene and start their research. In the course of their seek they locate Topher's pockets beneath the mattress. They deliver Toir in for thinking emotional. Toir insists he did not have love with all people. Terry tells him they do not care whether or not he had love or now no longer, they just need the girl's call. Toir exhibits that her call is Alyssa and describes the brown leather-based jacket she became carrying. He additionally mentions that she became with a boy named James. The police now have vast proof to comply with. Upon whilst they watch for the teacher, Alyssa starts evolved to experience hungry. In order that they head to a close-by eating place, she cannot stop glancing at James, haunted via way of means of the image of him stabbing Clive with inside the neck. James, sensing her soreness, explains that the knife became a birthday present from his father for searching. Alyssa, nonetheless unsettled, questions why all people might convey a knife round. Whilst James reaches out to keep her hand, she pulls away, announcing she would not need him to touch her. Alyssa excuses herself beneath the pretense of going to the toilet. However, as an alternative, escapes via a window. She makes the decision to depart him at the back of and disappears. James waits for her for a long term, earlier than figuring out that Alyssa isn't always coming again for the primary time. Feelings start to stir inside him. He is familiar with his father greater absolutely now. The manner he used horrific jokes to manage with the ache of dropping his spouse. Desperate, James techniques a few Avenue thugs and asks them to overcome him. Whilst they refuse, he gives them cash to do it. After the thrashing, James finally is familiar with something approximately himself. He isn't the psychopathy idea he become. He has feelings too. In a second of readability, he calls the police, telling them he has facts approximately a homicide. The scene shifts to 11 years in advance. James, as a younger boy, tells his mom that he desires to see the ducks that day. His mom, Ailey, even though visibly suffering with despair, does not appear to be in struggle with Phil. There may be no argument, simply an underlying heaviness. James and his mom head to a close-by pond to watch the geese. Earlier than they step out of the automobile, she hugs him tightly, telling him she loves him very lots. James is unaware that his mum has come there to take her very own lifestyles. As he receives out to feed the geese, she speeds up the automobile, intentionally riding it into the pond. She drowns as James watches helpless, witnessing her mom committing the unthinkable again. With inside the gift, James sits with inside the police station, grappling together along with his mind. He starts evolved to rethink whether or not confessing to the homicide is a superb concept. Whilst the police officer begins evolved wondering him James' modifications, the difficulty claiming that his mum's loss of life 11 years in the past become actually a homicide, now no longer a self-damage act. The officer, harassed, clarifies that what befell to his mum becomes certainly a self-damage act, now no longer a homicide. James acts as ale, even though he does not completely apprehend gambling the position of a person mentally disturbed. The officer, sensing something off, could him past, disregarding him as emotionally volatile. In the meantime, Detective Terry and Eunice go to Phil for further research. They collect facts approximately James studying greater approximately his historical past. Later they go to Alyssa's stepfather's residence to inquire approximately her involvement with inside the homicide. Greatly surprised via way of means of the information, Tony distances himself from the scenario, claiming no connection to Alyssa given that she isn't always his biological daughter. Whilst Derry asks Gwen for a current pictograph of Alyssa, Gwen is not able to offer one. A new nice gazing Gwen's fragile intellectual kingdom fast realizes that Gwen would possibly want expert assist. In the meantime, Alyssa stories the start of her menstruation and heads to a store to shop for undergarments, but she fast realizes that she's out of cash. Desperation drives her to discreetly thieve the undergarments. However, the store protect catches her with inside the act as he prepares to go looking her and get in touch with the police. An unexpected distraction happens. A determined outdoor loses sight of his child. The protect tells Alyssa to attend whilst he is going to assist the determined. Seizing the possibility, Alyssa makes her get away from the shop. As soon as outdoor she spots the lacking infant gambling close by, Alyssa takes a deep breath and makes a decision to help Maine the kid lower back to their worry. Determined for a quick second, she feels a feel of doing something proper on the different aspect. James returns to the eating place wherein Alyssa had left him, hoping she may come lower back. He sits there ready, keeping directly to the desire that she hasn't deserted him. Absolutely lower back at the shop, the protect, having dealt with the lacking infant scenario, surprisingly gives Alyssa a few biscuits, displaying her kindness rather than punishment. He lets her go together with a caution now no longer to Scouseboro again. However, as Alyssa leaves, guilt momentarily fades and he or she swipes the undergarments one extra time, but outdoor a wave of awareness hits her. What she's doing is incorrect. She throws the stolen gadgets away, absolutely conscious now that this behavior wasn't truthful, now no longer to herself and in particular now no longer to James, who had most effective attempted to guard her. She regrets betraying him with the aid of using strolling off. Determined to make matters proper, Alyssa heads lower back to the eating place and unearths James still looking ahead to her triumph over with guilt. She apologizes to him whilst James additionally seeks forgiveness for the killing of the person. In that second their bond rekindles more potent than earlier. Then in the meantime the research group at Clive's house uncovers James' knife, a crucial piece of proof. In the meantime, James and Alyssa Scouseboro a vehicle and head towards Leslie's location. The auto most effective has one cassette which they to begin with experience listening to, but after some time Alyssa loses hobby in it and throws it away. She believes that they did the proper thing with the aid of using killing the person, or even thinks that the police ought to praise them with a medal. After a while the auto runs out of fuel. They manipulate to attain a fuel station and James tells Alyssa to fill the tank whilst he maintains the auto strolling so nobody notices. Simply then the proprietor of the fuel station arrives and recognizes that the auto is strolling without keys. She realizes it is stolen and tells them that in the event that they need to gasoline the auto they need to show it off. James reluctantly agrees. The proprietor fills up the tank attempting to purchase them a whilst secretly signaling to her son to name the police, but her son does not trap directly to the sign and does not apprehend what she weighs. As soon as the tank is complete the proprietor takes Alyssa into the shop to pay. Alyssa, who has no cash, pretends to need to visit the toilet. The proprietor catches directly to her excuse and tells her son to name the police. At that second James walks into the shop pretending to hold a gun with the aid of tucking his hand into his jacket and needs the proprietor permit. Alyssa cross he pushes the proprietor right into a room and locks her with inside. The proprietor's son would not try and assist his mom, or alternatively he seems content material with the state of affairs due to the fact he's uninterested in running. He tells James and Alyssa that he additionally desires to go away and starts Evolve, taking gadgets from the shop. James begins Evolve the auto and he and Alyssa quickly power away, leaving the boy standing there looking them cross. In the meantime, Terry and Eunice visit Professor Clive's residence to research. Speaking with Clive's mom, Eunice asks if Clive had any non-public troubles, affairs or conflicts. Clive's mom, whilst understanding the whole thing approximately Clive's movements, denies any such element, pronouncing that he had no affair. In fact, Clive's mom is the only who has hidden all proof of his crimes. She asks the investigators to depart, and as they're approximately to move on, Eunice advises her to constantly stand through the truth. In the meantime, Alyssa makes a Telecel smartphone name from a Telecel smartphone sales space to her mom when Gwen asks her to return back domestic. However, Alyssa responds through telling her to inform Tony to off. Later, Clive's mum's judgment of right and wrong awakens, and he brings the proof of his crimes to Eunice. Eunice at once takes the proof to Terry. After reviewing it, Terry says that whilst Clive can be a killer, it would not alternate the reality that Alyssa and James aren't the actual murderers. Alyssa and James arrive at Leslie's residence. However, as opposed to Leslie, any other girl opens the door. The girl informs them that Leslie has left. Whilst Alyssa hears this, she begins to depart. However, James asks the girl if she is aware of where in Leslie's new residence is. The girl confirms she does. At this fact, the stolen automobile they're riding breaks down, forcing them to hold their adventure taking walks. As they stroll, it receives darkish, and that they eventually stumble upon a cabin inside the center of nowhere, which seems to be Leslie's new domestic. Leslie is thrilled to see Alyssa and at once hugs her. He looks like an alcoholic and drug addict. Alyssa introduces James to Leslie as her boyfriend and asks if they may live with him for some days. Leslie hesitates for a second, however then consents, pronouncing they are welcome to live so long as they want. The following morning, Leslie invitations James to play a goal capturing sport with knives. Leslie misses the goal, however James hits the bull's eye on his first attempt. Leslie is pretty inspired through James' talent. Leslie then asks James if Alyssa talks approximately him frequently. James responds that she does, and listening to this makes Leslie really satisfied. He hugs James in excitement. In the meantime, the investigators convey James and Alyssa's mother and father collectively for a joint interrogation. Alyssa's mother and father attempt guilty. The whole thing on film. Phil defends James, explaining that as an infant he witnessed his mum devote the self-damage act which affected his brain. However, he insists that James couldn't be capable of such severe crimes. Eunice feels a feel of pity for each of the children. Later, James and Alyssa witness Leslie being concerned in drug dealing. James shows that staying there might not be a precise concept. However, Alyssa defends her father, announcing they may be flawlessly secure after finishing the drug deal. Leslie defends his moves, claiming that he is just combating in opposition to the authorities and rich humans. To lighten the mood, Leslie takes James and Alyssa to a local bar on the alternative facet the investigators controlled to discover Leslie's vintage residence. Once they ask the female residing there approximately Leslie, she denies understanding anything approximately him. Terry, upon listening to this, leaves. However, Eunice discreetly slips her number to the female, telling her that she wants to defend each James and Alyssa from Terry. In the meantime, on the bar, Alyssa and Leslie are dancing collectively. Alyssa thank you Leslie that he in no way forgot her birthday and usually dispatched her playing cards. James watches them from the facet and starts to sense that Alyssa is drifting away from him. As they maintain ingesting, the female from Leslie's vintage residence arrives and calls Leslie over to speak. It's Miles revealed that Leslie has any other baby with this female. The female asks Leslie for new uniforms and books for the kid and accuses him of hiding out whilst the police are seeking out him. Alyssa, upon seeing the kid, is greatly surprised and asks if Leslie is his father. The kid responds affirmatively, leaving Alyssa in disbelief. Leslie attempts to keep away from the state of affairs, however in the end frustrated storms out of the bar. In a panic, he begins his automobile and by chance runs over a canine. Alyssa and James, though unwilling, are compelled to euthanize the canine due to the fact it's Miles struggling badly. Later, in his cabin, Leslie starts taking drugs. Whilst looking the information on TV, he learns that there's a prize for everybody who captures James and Alyssa. Seeing the provide, he's tempted through greed. Alyssa and James bury the canine collectively at the seaside as they grow to be extra intimate. Alyssa abruptly recalls the scene with Professor Clive and will become frightened. She tells James that they could do this all over again. In the meantime, Eunice receives Leslie's girlfriend's tip off approximately his place, and without informing Terry, she heads at once to Leslie's cabin. Morning arrives and James and Alyssa awaken through the seaside. Alyssa shows that they need to board Leslie's boat and sail to the farthest nook of the sector to begin a brand new lifestyle. James consents and they head to Leslie's cabin to get the boat keys. Eunice observes the cabin from a distance. On the alternative facet, Terry unearths out that Eunice is undertaking the research on her personal. She sends Eunice a message caution her that if she is doing this by myself it smiles a big mistake. James and Alyssa input the cabin, wherein Leslie laughs approximately the canine's demise, inquiring for forgiveness whilst Alyssa requests the boat keys. Leslie refuses and admits that he is aware of they've killed a person and that there is a praise for them. He reassures them that he won't screen something and guarantees their protection. Alyssa but says she is aware of all approximately his guarantees. Leslie scolds Alyssa, however James steps in, telling him now no longer to communicate to her that manner. The tension escalates, however Leslie attempts to extrade the situation via way of means of providing to make tea while pretending to accomplish that. He secretly calls the police and hides his Telecel smartphone. He then claims they have got run out of milk, providing biscuits as an alternative, and sits down. Subsequent to Alyssa, Leslie apologizes to Alyssa for now no longer telling her approximately his different son, explaining that he become too ashamed. He tells her that he's her father and that she will inform him something. Feeling emotionally beaten, Alyssa confesses that they killed a person due to the fact he tried to attack her. James without delay senses something is inaccurate. He fast grabs a gun and unearths the hidden Telecel smartphone, informing Alyssa that Leslie referred to as the police. Whilst Alyssa hears approximately Leslie's betrayal for cash, she grabs a knife and stabs him with inside the thigh. At that moment Eunice enters, taken aback via way of means of what she sees James protecting the gun and the knife in Leslie's thigh. In the meantime, Terry discovers their vicinity and heads there with their complete police pressure on the opposite hand. Eunice attempts to provide an explanation for to each of them that she is right here to assist them, now no longer the police. She tells them that their parents are clearly involved approximately them. She wishes James a satisfied birthday and tells him that he has become 18 nowadays. Alyssa is amazed upon listening to this and tells James that he must have advised her in advance, as she could have delivered him a present with inside. The center of this conversation, Leslie interrupts, caution them now no longer to concentrate to Eunice as she is attempting to get them each locked up in prison. Alyssa responds announcing its high quality that Leslie himself referred to as the police, however, is now announcing this. Leslie explains that he did it to guard her from getting into problem. Alyssa receives indignant and kicks Leslie with inside the leg, making him in pain. She then tells him that if he couldn't improve his youngsters, well, he shouldn't supply beginning to them. Alyssa asks Leslie if he had sincerely dispatched the birthday playing cards all the ones years, or if his mom Gwen had written them. Leslie admits that it become now no longer him, however his mom Gwen who had written the playing cards herself. Listening to this breaks Alyssa's coronary heart, because the man or woman she had taken into consideration, a father parent, became out to be her enemy. Leslie attempts to provide an explanation for, however Alyssa tells him to close up. Then Alyssa asks Eunice if they give up now, whether or not they'll be kept in a juvenile middle, and if she and James might be collectively. Eunice responds that it is hard for that to happen. Alyssa apologizes, after which knocks Eunice subconscious through hitting her on the pinnacle. James grabs the boat keys and the two of them run in the direction of the boat. As quickly as they attain the seashore, James tells Alyssa that she need to inform the police that he abducted her so she may be free and not anything will occur to her. However, Alyssa refuses and insists that they need to run away collectively. James apologizes, however then in a second of desperation he hits Alyssa on the pinnacle and knocks her out earlier than going for walks in the direction of the coast. The police arrive simply in time to seize Alyssa. They then begin firing at James as he runs whilst escaping. James displays at the reality that he has turned 18 nowadays. It's far best now that he begins to apprehend the actual which means of relationships and the feelings